Hey, what's up? I'm your host, Bob Thompson, and welcome to Unleashing Greatness, the #1 show for people who are ready to finally start or scale their own business and do it successfully. Over the last 9 years, I've scaled my little basement business to 15 plus locations and several other businesses, but it hasn't been without trial and error and lots of adversity. I'm here to share with you the strategies and tools that actually work when running a business and how not to lose yourself while doing it. So if you're ready to unleash the greatness within you, let's dive into today's show. In 2017, I made one of the biggest shifts in my business, and that's when I decided to franchise. Up until that point, I was just operating gyms, and then I was like, hey, I want to scale this business to the moon. This is what I thought was going to be the path to get there. So what I'd love to do today on Unleashing Greatness, if I can even say that correctly, is I'd like to dive into my experience so far as a franchisor. I want to discuss the process of what it took to become a franchisor, then the early stages of franchising and some of the lessons that I've learned, and then I would love to go into where we are right now in the franchise and really how we plan to grow it. And as I was like, I wanted to dive in and I wanted to talk about this today, because I think it's an interesting topic. There's not too many franchisors out there, so it's not a big topic that a lot of people talk about. It also seems to be a topic that interests a lot of people because, like, in the eyes, you think franchise, you think like McDonald's or Chipotle, you think these giants and stuff. Actually, I don't even think Chipotle is a franchise. Anyway, I know they were at one point. It may not be anymore. I don't remember. But, franchising, you think this, you go, wow, this is like, a huge endeavor or something like that. And I think it's definitely, for me, it was a very, very different business experience. And I went into it thinking one thing, and it turns out it's something completely different than I was actually thinking. So in 2017, I was looking back this morning, that's when I initiated the process to start franchising. Now, why I went that path is I had a mentor of mine, Sam Bakhtiar, who franchised his gym business, and it just shot off to the moon. I think he had over 100 locations in like a year or two or something like that. And it was just really picking up steam. And I was like, well, hey, that's the path that he decided to go. I think that's going to be the path that I'm going to go. At that time, I had 8 locations, saw that it was working for him. And I was trying to think about how do I continue to scale this business? Because I can keep scaling it and open brick and mortar after brick and mortar for myself. And I would be the owner operator. And I looked at it as like this would be a slow path to growth. Open up 1 a quarter or something like that with my current skill sets at the time. And and then I thought if I do franchising, essentially I could be awarding a handful every single month, opening new locations every single month, and we would grow much faster without my personal capital to actually open up those locations. So I started thinking that would be a great option to do. So instead of going to Sam and really discussing with him his processes and his feedback from franchising, I decided just to keep it to myself because I like to go the hard way sometimes, learn about franchising, and then I went with a consulting group to get going. Now, I'm super happy that I went with that consulting group. I wish I probably talked to Sam much earlier in this process. But I went with the consulting group, and I realized after looking at it, from the minute I decided to go with that consulting group to the time I awarded my first franchise, it was an 18-month process. Compare that to when I decided to open up a gym. It takes me like 3 months. If I'm like, hey, I'm going to open up a gym in this market, I go and then I find the location, order the equipment, put the ads up, hire the employees, or maybe vice versa. You probably would hire the employees, then put the ads up, and then I'm good to go. Generally speaking, depending on how much outfitting has to be in there. And then maybe right now might be a little different getting equipment and stuff. But generally that's how long the process takes, unless it's a tough market. Franchising, I don't think I understood the undertaking that was going to have to happen. It's in this business, when I went with the consultant, they were able to then hook me up with a lawyer who's going to write your FDD and your FA, which is your franchise disclosure document, and your franchise agreement. The franchise disclosure document is what's a prospective franchisee is going to get to discover everything about the business, to learn about the ins and outs of it and the history of it and all that good stuff and what they can expect from you. And then you have your franchise agreement, which is what binds both of you during that time period of franchising to operations of what they're responsible for, what you're responsible for. It's your contract of how this business looks. And that is obviously not going to be built by me. It's going to be built by a lawyer, and they're going to have that help taken care of. And then The cool thing with that consultant is they actually then sent somebody in. Is I was scaling this business. Yeah, I had 8 locations, as I already said. I wouldn't necessarily say that operationally it was an amazing organization. We had great people that were super bought in. So we had just rock star employees. We had really good marketing and sales systems, and they were providing a great experience and learning as we were going on. But not like we had tons of great SOPs or any of that stuff, or even an ops manual that we really even used or referred to. So the consultant team, they came in and they actually had somebody kind of discover the entire business, study it, and create the ops manual that would then go with the franchise, and then also assist throughout a bunch of the other stuff in the process. But they built everything out while educating me on franchising. And at this time, I then also would talk to other franchisees or franchisors and get their feedback. And one of the most common pieces of advice that I got was to really go slow in the beginning. Don't try and go explosive off the bat. Only award or sell, whatever you want to call it, just a handful of franchises initially, get them open and operating, but also discover what problems are going to happen. And then when you get those problems, you discover those problems, then you can make those tweaks to then go into the next one that you open and get it better, and then get it better. Because really what you want to do is you want to have this well-oiled machine that when a location opens, they just kick ass from the very, very beginning. And I even talked to somebody who, they thought they had that process in place. They thought they had great franchisees, and they awarded a bunch. And then I think it was almost like 5 years later, they were almost kind of like restarting within the last year. They had great franchisees. They had like half of the original franchisees on board and stuff like that. But they found out their mistakes, and they, wish they didn't have to do that again. A lot of these, the advice of franchisors and franchisees I talked to also stated that there's generally a hockey stick effect in a franchise that's going to work. It's going to be super slow, and then it's going to boom, years 3 to 5 or something like that, just blow up, take steam. People are going to discover that this is a business that really works, a really great model, and they'll start really coming on board. So over the 18 months, I really spent, it was working with the consultants and lawyers, getting everything really built out. And then, a couple months, once it was finally done, being like, hey, we have this franchise. Here's this thing that I did. My last location was like 2017. That's why you haven't seen me open a location since then. And to give some context, in that 18-month period, if I opened up, a location every quarter, what would that have been? In that time to award one franchise and go through this and learn this whole new business, which was then taking attention away from that other business that was growing explosively, I could have opened up 6 locations. And in that 18-month period to award the first franchise, and then franchising, you generally speaking don't make money right away. You get that franchise fee, then they open, and that franchise fee goes to the sales rep and then to the team to help train them and get them open. And then eventually you'll get like royalties, and it goes from there. With a gym, I generally like to get a location up to like $300,000 to $500,000 within the first 12 months. When I was opening locations, I'd either be profitable or cash flow profitable, profitable or cash flow positive by the time the doors open, depending on the location, depending on the market. So in that time period, that's what could have happened for that business. But, I even looked at it still as, hey, the way to scale faster, longer term play would be through franchising. Another big reason that I also decided to franchise too is I've been pretty fortunate within the fitness industry. I've been pretty fortunate within my business. It treated me pretty well. And I was able to do a lot of things, other things that I wish I adjusted and did differently. Absolutely. But even still today, I have a pretty good life as a result of it. And I wanted others to share the same things. Kind of like why I do this podcast. I want to be able to give, insights and share value of what I've done and what I'm currently doing so that hopefully it helps you. Kind of same thing. It's like, hey, here's how we can help the brand and then help individuals who like hate their job, are stuck, or not doing something that they're freaking passionate about, and they could do something that is their own thing. And then they'll be able to make a decent amount of money doing something that they like, and at the same time, the brand's going to grow, and we're going to be changing tons of lives in the communities that we're in. And so for me, it was like, instead of opening up the gyms, this was still the path to go. And that's what I went. So eventually I was able to award the first franchise. Now, the advice that I was given in that process, and multiple people said this, was to award slow. Now, does everybody always follow this advice? No. Did I follow this advice? No, I did not. Within the first, I don't know, like 4 months, 3 months, 6 months or whatever, of awarding my first franchise, I went and awarded 30 locations to about 15, 16 different franchisees. So some of them opened up multi-locations. So we either had a 1-pack available or a 3-pack available. 3-pack was like, hey, I'm going to open up a location. A year or so later, going to open up another location. A year or so later, open up another location. And those are going to be my businesses, and maybe open up more after that too. So some people did that. Some people did the 1 location agreement. And so like right away, I was like, this is freaking awesome. Like, people love this. They like the business. They like the opportunity to help a lot of people in their communities. They're signing up, and we were getting people that passed our qualifications and everything like that. So we awarded a ton of locations. This is great, because also one of the beliefs that ended up getting shattered, like, and we'll talk about as we're moving into this phase, was for me opening up a location happened in 3 months. It's what I knew how to do it. I don't want to like downplay it, but I guess I spent so much time in this business. Like, once I opened it, I became obsessed. So I wanted to learn everything I could about being the best gym owner that I could be, from educating myself on the off time to being in groups and talking to other gym owners that were better, had bigger, better businesses than me, and then implementing, and then making tons of mistakes over the years, and then learning from those mistakes, correcting and continuing forward. So I had a lot of intimate knowledge when it came to running a gym. And I felt the systems were also pretty simple to follow as well. So I was like, hey, great, we have all these people coming on board. It's really simple to open up a gym, again, in my mind. And then when they open, it'll just be, freaking rocket ships and fireworks that they're just going to crush it out the gate. And almost at first it was confirmed. Like, first location, she did absolutely great. She opened up, success off the bat, continued to be a success moving forward. The second location, once we opened that up, we started running into some difficulties. We found that the individual that was running it just didn't, I think when we parted ways, he was like, listen, I love the brand. I love this business. I just don't like being a business owner. It's not for me. So that person ended up selling their location to another franchisee. But those were some of the complications that we realized. Like, sometimes we realized that maybe, that this business just isn't for everybody. And there was also things that we discovered throughout this process of like, how can we make it even easier? So as we started opening up locations, I saw that some locations were doing well when they opened. Others were just doing okay. So we really needed to figure out as the franchisor how to provide better assistance. So at that point in time, during like within the first year or so of becoming a franchise, or maybe going into the second year or whatever, it was like, you know what? Maybe we should hold off on awarding any more locations. Let's get these current franchisees open. We had a huge rush off the bat. Let's get these franchise locations open, because, the quicker they can open, and when they're open, the more successful they are, the better it's going to be for them and the brand. So that became the huge focus of where we were. And, it was a whole new business for me. So for me, I had to learn like a whole new set of skills almost that were not what it was like in the gyms. And during this process, I got another piece of advice from Bedros, who owns Fit Body Bootcamp. And he was like, hey, you can't do both. He's like, because at that time I was managing my 8 locations, and then I was also trying to manage and grow the franchise. And he was just like, and this is, obviously advice that I don't necessarily follow, but most people say focus on 1-2 things or whatever. But he's like, you can either own gyms or you can be a franchisor. He's like, you really shouldn't be both. And although I knew that at the time, it took me a little bit longer, and almost took to the pandemic happening for when that switch happened, because I looked for maybe other solutions to that issue. And but I think I truly believed deep down, like, hey, that's going to have to be the path it takes. I'm going to have to not be able to own my location so I can truly just focus on growing this brand as the franchisor. But throughout that time period, I was having to learn this new business. I was having to, really getting an education and a rough education within the business world, taking my lumps as we're doing this. But, initially the focus was like, hey, let's award and keep awarding and keep awarding and keep getting new locations, to then being like, you know what, let's slow it down. Let's actually focus on getting them open, helping these franchisees be successful. Then they can open up another location or whatever. And then once we really have ironed out our processes to opening and operating, then we can start going back to awarding locations. So exactly the original advice that I got from several people that I decided to ignore. And that's where we were. And we were really starting to get the machine to start operating a lot better. And then unfortunately COVID hit. COVID obviously was not good to the gym industry, especially on the East Coast. And, we had some locations that got 50%, 60% hits to their revenue. And it was like that for quite a bit. Imagine having a gym in freaking New Jersey. You know how much that sucked. So they had to take their lumps throughout that, but luckily most locations were able to make it through. We have some very resilient franchisees. Made it through, continued to operate, continue helping their people. And now for the most part, we're on the other side of it. So now it's like, hey, kind of takes us to the present day of where we are. And which is now, it's like, all right, we wanted to get our locations through the pandemic. I unlike some other franchisors, just didn't sell at all during the pandemic. I was like, hey, let's just get these ones doing well. I also went through my own shit and stuff like that. So now we're back to the point where we're like, hey, let's get everybody, I see the future of the fitness space being pretty freaking good, especially to brick and mortars. Even though there's tons of online and virtual stuff that's not going anywhere, and I think that's going to consistently be there. But as a brick and gym owner, especially like a micro gym, if you're doing boot camps or semi-private, those aren't going anywhere. They're going to continue to grow, and people are going to continue to want to come to your facility. There's some shifts that you need to focus on, but that's not going anywhere. So now, kind of gets us to the point of, how do I plan on growing this franchise? Do I plan on doing it the same way as I did before, or are we going to go a different route? And the answer is we're going to go a different route, and although I have, and I talked about it on the previous podcast, like I have a vision for, year and 3 years and stuff like that where I want the business to be, and also have a B-hack for it too. But the goal is to focus really just on 12-week blocks. So, over the summer, it was really like I wanted to have intimate conversations with the franchisees, get their feedback, what they liked about us, what they didn't like about us, how can we go about improving it, and like, hey, what can we do better for them so that they can operate their gyms, much better. And really getting that feedback and then taking that feedback and then implementing it, and then also growing the staff and adding more support staff for the franchisees. Before we're actually hosting a convention next week, we'll have all the franchisees come together, we'll kind of go over relearning, take a look at it, take a look at what the next year is going to look. And then the next year, again, we're only focusing at 12 weeks at a time. So, and once we're getting close to the close of this 12-week cycle. And I think there's maybe like 2 more months in it, into this current cycle. And then the focus is really just at this end of this 12-week cycle is to really just have a few prospects in the pipeline. And then over the next year, what we're going to do is we're going to slowly open new locations. We're not looking to add an aggressive amount like I did originally. We're looking to add a handful of just the perfect franchisees that are going to come on board and add to the brand. And then we're also looking to open up our current location. So we have about 3 locations that haven't opened yet. We had some delays obviously happen because of the pandemic. So they were waiting till things were good and then finding property and stuff like that. We're getting back into that phase for a lot of them, and some of them should be opening up relatively soon. So we're like, hey, let's add a handful, not a ton of new franchises. Let's get the current franchisees that haven't opened. Let's add on some really great fits to the system. So we're not trying to award 30, like 1, to a quarter, or initially get maybe 4 to 6 new franchises over the next year. Get the ones that haven't opened, and get our current locations to open up another location. And that's the plan moving forward, focusing on the quality. I know for me, a lot of times it's the quantity. In the beginning, it's like, hey, sell more, or something like that. Generate more leads. Instead, it's, let's make sure that our current people are getting the best service they can get, that they're operating the right way. We're then bringing on really, really good people. So we're going to be super selective over the franchisees and really make it a lot of hoops to jump through. You're not just anybody can open up a gym. We don't want that. So we want to have the best operators within the system who then have long-term plans for the locations as well. And then to deliver great support to them. And go with that hockey stick approach. Hey, if we do this in the first year, we're going to have a pretty damn good year in 2022. Then moving forward in 2023, we'll add in some more current locations, will open up more locations, and we'll be able to grow in that sense. And then we're looking at our hockey stick in about 3 years. And we're not actually going to even probably be running traffic for the next 3 to 6 months or so to be bringing on new franchisees. So how I brought new franchisees on previously was actually just through the internal community. And that's a route we'll probably continue to go as well. Get people that have experienced it, like it, that also have that business experience or knowledge that want to be part of this brand. So that's kind of, to wrap out the history of the franchise, from why I actually even went down that route to franchise, what that actually looked like, then the initial, and I probably could go into a lot more detail of it, as far as like, hey, like, it will look like it, but it was crazy. Like, at first it was just like tons of people. Talk about validation to something you started. You're like, wow, all these people who have generally been to the program and had a great experience, then want to be a part of the business. That's pretty cool. And then it was like, we're getting them open and we were hitting those hiccups that are going to be normal in business, learning from them and refining them. And then it's been like, hey, like, let's really refine this process. Let's really refine this process so that no matter who the operator is, they can absolutely kick ass. And now that we've kind of like ironed that out, now it's like, all right, let's go back to the growth mode. You know, generally speaking, I don't like to go growth and then slow back and then go back up and build that momentum again. But that's what we had to do. That's what we had to take, that kind of step pause in order to really protect the future of the company. And then now we'll be continuing to grow. So that's how the focus, and that's how it's going to go. So that's kind of the history of franchising. I know that not a lot of people have franchised. I've had a lot of people actually ask me, and not a lot of people, like a handful of people, ask me about franchising or that they're interested in franchising. So hopefully this little 20-minute spiel or whatever about it gave you some insight of what it's like, in the process that it went through, from the time period. I didn't really talk about the investment. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars initially to do it, and hundreds of thousands of dollars to operate and get going. Initially probably could have done that much better, much leaner, to be honest with you. Now it's more of a lean operation as we focus on growth, and then here's how our growth looks. Our growth isn't looking like, let's add 1 million freaking franchises this year. It's like, let's add the perfect franchisees into the system. We're absolutely going to crush it. Get the current ones doing great, get them doing great, and then add those right people. And then that way we're going to get the volume growth in the long term. So that's kind of what it's looking like for the franchise. What I want to do is I want to dive into each business a little bit more. This one's a little bit more like kind of history on it. I'm going to dive into some of the other businesses and exactly like what those plans are looking like right now. I know that this plan probably almost seems like really simplistic, and that's because it is. Like, that's because the plan isn't absolutely crazy. Like, to get those interesting prospects, we're just going to let people know, hey, listen, we're bringing on new franchisees. We're going to start with our current network. We're going to start with our current communities and stuff like that within the current ecosystem. And then we'll start running traffic. We'll run traffic on Facebook, YouTube, and Google, and then heavily qualify those people that are coming in. So those are going to be how we're actually planning on growing it. But the best growth is going to happen from internally making sure that the ones that we have are kicking ass, and then they want to open up new locations. So that's kind of how the franchise looks, which, again, might sound super simple. It is. Oftentimes, business doesn't have to be complicated. It has to just make sense, or you just have to really do the simple stuff, and you have to do it consistently. We, I think, as human beings, like to overly complicate things. But moving forward, I do want to dive into some of the other businesses and exactly like what they look like, especially launching one and relaunching another product. So 2 products, or 2 brands, I should say, that are product-based. What it looks like from one that was from inception to when it's going to be launching, what we're doing and what we're going to be doing, as well as the relaunch of another brand. So hope you enjoyed today. If you got value out of it, I'd love to hear your feedback. If you think somebody that could get some interest in it, please, I ask that you share it with them. But until next time, I'll catch you later.
Hey, thanks for spending your time with me today. I made this show to help people just like you overcome the challenges and adversity that come with entrepreneurship. So if you know someone that could truly benefit from today's show, please be sure to share this episode with them. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week on Unleashing Greatness.